With nearly every success, there is a line of failures and setbacks, sometimes a very long line. Many of those stories get condensed into pithy journeys that minimize the struggle. That's where From the Ashes with Mark Azoulay comes in. On today's show, you'll hear honest conversations about triumph and disaster that Mark's guests faced and how they overcame the adversity to shine. Now, here's your host, Mark Azoulay.
Welcome to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azoulay, and I'm here with a very special guest, my best friend, Francesco Marsili. Now, this guy is one of America's brightest minds. He's literally put stuff on Mars. He's done laser communication across the cosmos. He's even done quantum teleportation, which he tries to explain to me, and I have no idea what he's talking about whatsoever. Now, Francesco, no one knows, right? Francesco is a really important part of the origin story of From the Ashes because he was the first person that I think I've actually talked to the Ashes about. We read a book called Iron John about masculinity, and Iron John talks about the ashes in them. Francesco, you want to tell us a little bit about your understanding of what the ashes mean? What did you learn from Robert Bly?
So I read that book about, maybe 6 years ago. And what I remember about it is he talks about the ash eaters in the Norse kind of culture, which were these young men that, correct me if I'm wrong here. So they're like these young men that they just like basically live for a part of their life, like in the ashes of this giant fire that like the tribe used to keep in their like communal living situation. So they basically like kind of took a break from life and they just like were in there until they figured out the next phase of their life or like their vocation or something like that. So my understanding of the ashes is basically it's a take a break and like snap from what your life has been so far, like destroy the patterns, like burn everything, to reduce it to ash. And then from there, just like take a break, take a pause and rebuild. And that is very, very hard. Think about living in the ashes of a fire.
Yeah, it's really tough. And he talks about this like catabasis process where it's like where everything falls apart and all your systems break down. And for a lot of people in modern time, a lot of men, it looks like a divorce. It looks like losing a job, maybe the death of a loved one, maybe a illness that comes on. You know, for me, it was addiction recovery. It's this idea where everything snaps and you're just like, it's a great metaphor. You're shriveled up in a hole and you just have to like bleed out until you evolve, you know?
Your life disintegrates and, you know, you might stay there. You know, you might remain there unless you see. And I think that we were lucky, you know, to have each other and to also read the books, like some books at exactly the right time. This is one of them. And like discover some philosophies at the same time, like at the right time, like, you know, like stoicism, like Buddhism, etc., where you need a certain mindset and certain tools to actually deal with the ashes and the disintegration of like everything you thought you know, and you know, like your self-image of being competent and awesome and being in control to transcend it and grow. Otherwise, it's going to be like a pretty painful, long experience.
Yeah, and you might live there. You might get stuck.
Yeah, you might live there.
Yeah. So you've been through a couple ashes periods in your life. Which one would you like to share with our listeners today?
Yes, sure. I have several ashes stories. Like looking back, I think everyone can look at their lives and say, "Oh, like that's the ashes year. That's the ashes period where I need this change." And we just like don't call it this like that way. So my story is about the period where we were actually reading these books and like understanding how stoicism works and stuff like that. So it's about 1 year that is like 2016 to 2017 that I called the year of the ashes for me, because what happened there? So I was working I'm in technology, so I'm a physicist, like electrical engineer. So I've done like a bunch of like research in many fields. At the time, I was working for NASA, and I was working on this like at the time like really cool for me project to call basically to set up a high speed communication link between Earth and Mars. Like if you want to like if you have Matt Damon on like Lost on Mars and you want on Mars and you want like a Skype with him, you can't just use. I think like in the Martian he uses like some kind of like a Vikings probe to so it's very low bandwidth, right? So, but if you want to Skype with him, then you need to do like all kinds of like use all kinds of tricks. Anyway, I was working on that, and for my career at the time, like my career trajectory, I was like, kind of an expert in the field, was invited to all the conferences, and I reached kind of like the pinnacle of my academic career because that's what I wanted to do since, like my 20s. But I wasn't really satisfied. And so I decided to basically burn everything. So change fields. I went from being towards the end of 2016, I basically quit their job to take another job and work on something that I wasn't really familiar with, but it would give me the possibility to actually learn a new field and like make connections, work instead of like academia and government labs in like a private company. So it was a big change in many respects. And so I basically went from being like a well-respected, expert in the field to being a scrub, which it took a little bit of swallowing my own pride, which was a good teaching experiment, like a teaching experience. So on top of that, though, towards the end of 2016, I was also dating this woman for 2 years. Her name is Steele, and we just moved in together that summer. So in September 2016, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which it's kind of it's a chronic illness that it's incurable, and it like kind of destroys your nerves. So some people, can like lose the use of their limbs, or like lose their eyesight, or be like have chronic pain. And the particularly kind of like nerve-wracking thing about this is that it's not just like something like a flu that you get and it just like progresses and you just like get worse and worse and worse. It's basically comes in bursts that they call relapses. So basically one day you're fine and you're like hanging out with your friend. The day after you wake up and you're like, oh wait, I can't move my right leg.
It's on the floor.
Yeah, completely random. Yeah. So basically the entropy in my life like exploded. So right now I had, the woman that I moved in with, I wanted to marry, and my like nice, safe government job at NASA where everyone respected me. And now I went to being like the newbie in this new field where, like the company that I joined, like the people were like super friendly to me there. And then like dealing with the person that I'm in love with having like this very serious illness that no one really knows very much about. So yeah, that was very difficult. And how did I deal with that? So well, Mark, you were like a big part of dealing with that. Like we had a lot of kind of our weekly, we touched base weekly with our war councils where we just like discussed our lives and how to cope with these kind of things. And that's where, I really got very deep into meditation and study Buddhism, studying like stoicism, which is all about basically all of this stuff is to kind of reframe what happens to you. And you probably talked about it like in your podcast before, is the difference between pain and suffering. So I was going through a lot of pain, but the trick, I think, like the tricky part was not to suffer about it, and try to take all of these things as an opportunity for growth. And learning about stoicism, that was one thing. Or, for example, now I got dealt this card where my life is like complete random, right? It's like one day the personal life is fine, but by the way, the story evolves into us getting married the year after. So that was another non-trivial decision where you're dating someone, and it's not that you're married for 20 years and that person gets cancer and you're like, oh, you will always be with them, et cetera, et cetera. Like here, you're like dating for like 2 or 3 years. I don't remember exactly. Are you okay with spending the rest of your life with this in your life, right? So I
mean, that's a crazy choice, right? I mean, that's
it was a difficult decision
that you see in movies. That's a choice that you talk about with your loved one, like, hey, if I got cancer, would you still love me? But for you, that actually happened.
Yep.
That was real for you.
It was real, and it ain't easy. It ain't easy like in the movies, because fear is a very real thing, and we seek security, and your brain starts playing tricks on you, and if you don't acknowledge that. So that's the thing that kind of aggravated me the most about this whole process, where like there were people that were like didn't even acknowledge how difficult the situation was. That was like, oh yeah, obviously, you're just gonna like spend the rest of your life together, and you're gonna deal with all this. But I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Can I think about it for a couple of months? So, and in the end, I think it boils down on what kind of person Teal was, and she stepped up too to the challenge, because like something like this can destroy you, and you can fall into depression, don't recover. No one would actually blame you. I mean, you have a chronic ill, and the poor you, but she really showed me kind of what kind of person she is, and she showed me like that. She convinced me that she's the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, because she never acted like she was defeated.
I know. She's an unbelievably strong person. I mean, it's such a privilege for me to know her too.
So yeah, I won that. And I want that in my life. I wanted that in my life. So that's how I decided to go ahead, get married. And now we just had a baby, and we are, knock on wood, we're dealing with the progression of the illness, in a way that she's doing okay. She's like doing small hikes. Last year we just did a big gathering with the tribes in Zion, with Mark and family, etc. So what the message here is, folks, just feel the fear, but just do it anyway, because otherwise you will be paralyzed. But you also need to deal with the uncertainty.
Can you say a little bit about what that was like for you? Like when that fear hit you or that uncertainty hit you, had you ever felt anything like that before in your life? Or was it like a new level of ashes? Yeah.
So that's another, again, like reframing everything that happened to me, like into a growth opportunity. Yes, I have all of this, and I got to learn how to deal with chaos, for example, or all of these happens to me and Teal. And basically it acted as a focusing filter, focusing function. And basically it strips your life down to what really matters. Like all the fluff that we used to care about and worry about and be aggravated by. This is all like a kid's game. So that was like the big revelation for us, which, I'm not saying like I'm thanking MS and everything. It's just like, would I like to be like disease free and completely unaware? Maybe, right? But this happened to me. So we used it to really think about our life and understand what's really valuable. Like the friends that are really friends, the people that really have compassion, or the people that just like go through the motions. And so yeah, that was like unlike anything I experienced before, because and I realized that, yeah, like the problems that I thought I had until then weren't really problems. So that's a cool thing to learn when you're like in your mid-30s. Some people learn that when they're like 70, and you're like, oh shit, I wasted 70 years of my life.
Yeah, so, right.
Yeah.
When something bad happens to them at that age, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I, invested all this time and energy into like collecting baseball cards or something, right? It's like, oh man, I really should have spent more time with my grandkids. I mean, it makes me think, back to the original Ashes story, I've done sweat lodges, which one day I'm going to get you out to do one.
I want to, yes.
You're in it and it's like really hot. It's like almost 200 degrees, like almost dying hot, like heat stroke hot. And when you're there and you're on the ground and you're just sweating and dying, your brain gets to a place where it's shut down and the only thoughts that you have are important, right? Because everything else just gets like melted, right? It like melts your neurons and you can't think about anything else.
Yeah, you can't. You don't have time for that. Yes, I agree. So that's like the story for me. Like the Ashes is this kind of disintegration of everything that I thought I knew and I thought I had control over. And how you get out of it is it's all this work. Because again, like you can get defeated. And that's probably like the more natural reaction to it. Or you can, really toughen up, like and like react to the pressure with growth. So and then you get out of the Ashes, and then like I think the year after, we went in the Abbey to like naming like all the years. It was something like the Phoenix, and then like On Fire. So like it went better. So yeah. So we went. We got married, and now we have a kid, and we just was born, little Giorgio Marsili, and I learned about, chaos theory and Robert Boyd, which we'll talk about in another podcast maybe. So all good stuff.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk more about that when we come back from our commercial break. We'll talk about stoicism. We'll talk about chaos theory. We'll talk about Buddhism. I think there's a lot that we can go, coming off of this Ashes experience. I'd imagine the listeners want to hear, what kind of changes you made and how your perspective shifted after going through this intense burning period. So for those of you listening at home, check us out on social media. It's Mark M. Mazzolay at everything. If you're liking what you're hearing, give us a like, share it. Everything helps, especially as we're starting this podcast off. Every little hype, every little promotion really helps to get us really moving in the right direction. So stay tuned, and we'll talk to you on the next.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are the experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azulay.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azulay, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Have you friended us on Facebook yet? Why not? Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for the keywords Voice America. Once you are part of our Facebook network, you'll receive daily messages about what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and new happenings at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. And you can add your voice to the always active discussions on our timeline. Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for Voice America.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azulay for From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. We'll have another edition of the program then. Meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. Until next time.
Welcome back to From the Ashes. I'm your host, Mark Azulay, and we are talking to Francesco Marsili about his Year of the Ashes experience, where he changed jobs, went from being the top of his field, super scientist, to being an absolute scrub, having to prove himself to a bunch of nerds that were half his age. And on top of that, having his girlfriend at the time, now wife, now mother of his children, go through MS. And he just really having to question and simplify and focus and burn off a lot of the excess in his life so he could really focus on what was important to him. And over the break, we were talking about some of the philosophies that were helpful. And, you mentioned chaos theory, you mentioned Buddhism, you mentioned stoicism. And let's start with chaos theory, because I'd imagine our listeners aren't as familiar with that one than with the other. So tell us about it.
Yes. So chaos theory, let me put it in this term. So the reason I stumbled upon chaos theory is because my life became like very, very uncertain. And so I was trying to look into a way, like strategies to deal with uncertainty. And so I stumbled upon this guy called John Boyd, not Robert Boyd. It's like Robert Bly is from the Ashes Eaters. John Boyd is like this strategist from the 60s that it's kind of a genius. It's kind of like modern Sun Tzu, like The Art of War. He read like all these strategies of the past and like improved on Sun Tzu. And you probably never heard about him. Me neither. It was just like very like serendipity. So John Boyd was this person that studied chaos theory and kind of got elements of it and applied those to military strategy, which was perfect for me because my life became as unpredictable and complex as a battlefield. So what are these kind of like buzzword, like chaos theory, complexity? So let me give you an example of how chaos was even discovered, right? So chaotic systems are not random system. It's not like random noise, like stuff like white noise, right? Like the static from your radio. Chaotic systems are like the weather, where the chaos theory was actually discovered by a meteorologist. That it was like it was modeling the weather, and he was running these simulations, and he ran the same simulation like several times and got like drastically different results. And he realized that the reason for that was that the starting point, the starting state for the simulation had very, very small, that's because of like the computers at the time, like had like infinitesimal differences in the starting conditions. So basically that, 0.6 zeros and then 1 difference, like 10 to the minus 6, like 1 millionth of a part, 1 part in a million differences gets amplified and like create later on like very, very big differences, right? So
it's kind of like the butterfly effect.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So the butterfly effect, like the butterfly is flapping its wings in Bangalore, and there is a tornado in America, something like that. So, and there is like a mathematical this can be applied, for example, to a lot of things, like flow of fluids. For example, the flow of the heart from the heart into the aorta it's basically like a chaotic, turbulent, or like the atmosphere has turbulence, which is chaos. So, but the idea there, just to simplify, is the following. Basically, you have a system that is rapidly changing and is complex in the sense that you can't really predict it with a model. So like think about a battlefield. You can't really like predict how a battle is going to go. So what do you do? It's like, do you have a model where you have a general that is like giving orders to everybody across like a 180 horizon where you have like thousands of people fighting at the same time? That's the recipe for disaster, because you can't possibly keep up with all like the kind of the minutia of what's going on. So what you do is you basically need to relinquish control and to empower the different units to make their own decisions, but you need to do it in a way that that they will roughly follow certain guidelines, so they will not, that's where like the training goes on. So it's basically distributed. And this is also like how modern military, like a Desert Storm, for example, worked. Like that's why, that like at a certain point, like the Iraqis were so confused that were like shooting at each other or something like that when that happened. It's because if you distribute the control, you give you make execution like much, much faster. So anyway, so this is kind of a rabbit hole, but this is just an example of the things that I had to start learning, and the stuff that I had to, like the new tools that I had to acquire to deal with this situation. So in the end, in a nutshell, you don't need to read Boyd or Chaos theory. How do you deal with uncertainty? That's like my boiled down like one sentence. How do you deal with uncertainty, are rapidly changing conditions, a situation where your wife could wake up in a wheelchair from one day to another? Options. Just create multiple options for you. And that's how you can deal with it. And maybe some options you will never use, right? But it's not you might think, like you're just wasting time and energy, but it depends on the uncertainty that you're dealing with. So options to deal with chaos.
Well, and I think the part he talks about with Boyd of relinquishing control from the top is really critical. It's moving from a top-down model, right, the general scheme, the horizon, to a bottom-up model, which is every individual unit having some power and having some control, and more important, like you said, having training. So, when I see how you work with Teal and how you work in your life, it really is focusing on the details, but not letting your ego get in the way. And I think that's where Buddhism kind of ties in, right? Where it's like not letting the plan become a certainty and not like being so focused on the outcome of what's going to look like. But if all your little individual pieces are ticking together, working really in synchronicity, then it's going to work out, right? And you might actually get a more favorable result than what you had in your mind.
Yes, the plan is not the prediction, meaning like if you make a plan, you should never, I never expect for what my life looks like. I never expect for things to go exactly as I picture it in my mind. That's better than no plan, right? Because like the normal, like another reaction could be, oh, there's too much chaos in your life, so why plan? Just don't plan. Just do it. Just live every day by day. That's not really me, first of all. And
you're way too neurotic for that. It's never going to work.
Yeah, it's never going to work. But also, like, there's only a limited thing, like amount of things that you can get done or you can accomplish with that, right? For example, having a kid, right? Having a kid with Teal.
Talk about chaos.
Yeah, talk about chaos. So, but even like getting there, so Teal has this disease, and she's taking some meds that we don't know how they are affecting the fetus, right? Because for ethical reason, there's not much research on drugs on pregnant women for very obvious reasons. So again, that was like a jump into the void. We don't know. What do you do? Like, do you live like day by day and you're paralyzed by fear and you're like, oh, I will never have a kid because this could go wrong? That's not me. That's not Teal. So we said, let's just make a plan and let's see. And we're gonna deal. And we put together like a lot of like contingency plans and options to deal with whatever could go wrong. And that's one thing that the Stoics say is like a lot of people say, but I think the Stoics probably were the first ones. That we spend our life worrying about things that never happen. So, and I do that too. It's just that I just do stuff anyway.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? We often reference the Dune like litany of fear, right? Which is
fear is the mind killer.
That's what it's all about. And what the whole point of that thing is that it's not about not feeling fear, right? It's about feeling the fear and then doing it anyway and pushing through it. And in that, right, you get stronger, right? In that, you learn to tolerate more fear. You learn to build courage. It's actually an active practice instead of a passive thing.
Absolutely. I think fear is sometimes, like jumping off of a bridge. Clearly, you should listen to the fear and not do it. So, be smart. But sometimes fear tells you where the growth and where the value and where the prize is, because that's the stuff that like most people don't want to do, right? And so if you do it, that's where you might actually then reap the rewards. But always this is not an absolute. There's situations where fear it tells you to actually get out of a situation and you should do it. Like another time we can talk about my encounter with a grizzly bear in Denali. So at that point, you don't go and play with the grizzly bear.
You can tell that story now. We have time.
Oh, for sure.
That's a good one.
That's a pretty good one. So that's me. So just this is kind of like the cultural clash that I had, or like the cultural adaptation, right? That I had to go through, like coming from Italy to the US. I was not really fresh off, but it was probably like only a few years since I immigrated into the US. And in Italy, we have nature, we have national parks, but like, we've basically urbanized everything, right? So we have you're lucky to see a little bit of wildlife if you go to a national park. If you see a teeny tiny like black bear or like some rare bird, that's like you actually is worth your trip. So it didn't really register with me that if you go in the middle of Denali National Park in Alaska, that's like the wild. You are where it's basically, that's where the wild is, right? So it's not like some kind of tamed nature, like a rescued oasis. That's like stuff that has been that way for like thousands of years, and you're just there, and you should be, you should be very, very careful because you're not on top of the food chain. So I go there already with like this kind of spirit. It was like, oh, I hope I can see a grizzly bear, maybe from like far away, etc. And that happened like 20 minutes into driving in. I saw a grizzly bear with a cub, and I was like, I consider myself very lucky. Then we got like progressively, like I was with a group of other Italians with like no expertise of the real like wilderness. And also we got into Denali like after hours. So we didn't have the briefing with the rangers where they tell you, hey, this is bear country. Be careful. Put your food in a bear canister and like have bear spray and whatever. So day after, no briefing, no nothing, no bear canister, no bear spray, no, absolutely, like, you know, like when you see like these documentaries of like stuff like, how could the tourists be so stupid? So that was me. We decided to just like walk into the wild, like into like a straight line into the tundra and just like camp out for the night. And that was exactly this weekend, like the Memorial Day weekend, which in Denali they call Bear Weekend, which is basically when all the grizzly bears wake up and they're hungry and they come from like the mountains, wherever they're sleeping, and they come down to the valley and eat everything that they find. And so we set out camp, right, with our food just like hanging there with like no way to kind of like contain the smell. And then we went on a hike just to sizzle our appetite before dinner. And that's when we met the first grizzly bear, like met close encounter, like probably, 20 feet or something like that. And that's like primal fear. That's like primal fear. They're like, oh my God, this thing is like as big as a smart car and walking towards me. So in that case, well, we are alive clearly because the ranger rescued us. Thank you, rangers in Denali. You're awesome. But that was a case where you should listen to your fear and actually at a very kind of fast pace walk away from the grizzly bear. Don't run. Don't run.
Don't run. They're going to think you're prey. Well, and that's a good example of when, having no plan doesn't really work.
Absolutely. Exactly. Right? That's why, yep.
Casual hanging out in bear country during bear weekend.
You get destroyed.
After hours, right? No planning, no options. I remember that you brought a knife. Remember you were telling me, you're like, I got this knife, like in case the bear gets me. And I was like, brother, if a bear gets close enough for you to stab it, you're already dead. You're already dead. You're not going to be able to fight a bear with a knife.
The blade of the knife was as long as one of the claws of the bear. It's like, don't try to win a knife fight with a grizzly bear. That's the takeaway.
Well, as we're moving into our final segment here, if you want to hear more from Francesco, shoot us an email at podcast@mark-azoulay.com. I want to forward all of that over to him. If you want to have him back on a panel for another season, I'd love to hear any feedback you have about the episode. And as we move into our next commercial break, we'll talk directly to you guys and see what might be helpful for you if you've been in a similar situation. So stay tuned and we'll catch you on the other side.
Find out what's happening on the Voice America Talk Radio Network by keeping up with us on Twitter. You can find us at Voice America TRN.
In Mark's work with high performers and business owners, it is becoming increasingly clear to him that their biggest obstacle to success is themselves. They are the experts in their field, but are dragged down by their anxiety, poor time management, inability to focus, or self-sabotage. His role is to help you overcome these emotional and organizational issues so that you can truly excel in your business and your personal life. One of the most common hurdles that he sees is perfectionism, a crippling anxiety around performance. It's a fear of not being good enough, being publicly embarrassed, or of disappointing others. These fears paralyze brilliant people and bring them to their knees. This course will help you to break free from this mental prison and have more agency in your world. In this online course, we will break down the prison of perfectionism so that you can break out of it. For more information and to sign up, visit mark-azalea.teachable.com. That's Mark, MARC-Azalea, AZOULAY.teachable.com.
Have you friended us on Facebook yet? Why not? Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for the keywords Voice America. Once you are part of our Facebook network, you'll receive daily messages about what's happening with our shows, this week's featured guests, and new happenings at the Voice America Talk Radio Network. And you can add your voice to the always active discussions on our timeline. Just go to facebook.com/Voice America or search for Voice America.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azalea for From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. We'll have another edition of the program then. Meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. Until next time.
Welcome back to From the Ashes. We're talking about Francesco almost getting destroyed by a bear in Denali, having to get evacuated by the Rangers, and the importance really of having options and anticipating uncertainty and, dancing with the chaos instead of either A, trying rigidly to hold on to a plan way too much, or B, not having a plan, as in the case with the bear fight. So Francesco, in our last segment here, what we do is we try to speak directly to listeners. So if there's someone out there listening that has been in an ashes situation, that has, felt these parts of themselves burn out, that has, changed jobs or is dealing with a chronic illness or has to make a big change in their life, what would you want them to hear?
Yes, great. That let me think a bit about what would have helped me at the time. I mean, a big part of what helped me was talking to you, and figuring out things together, right? A lot of the help came from you from your Buddhist training, and because Mark is the person that introduced me to meditation. That's like the first time I sat and meditated was with you at Naropa. So definitely. So let's see. Let's think about this. So. One thing is, I suggest that whatever you do, whatever situation you're in, even if you're winning, even if you're top of your game, top of the world, start meditating. Just carve out 20 minutes in your life. If you don't have 20 minutes, you don't have a life. So just do it. Sleep 20 minutes less, play Halo 20 minutes or whatever popular game, just 20 minutes less and sit down. You don't even need to do it with legs crossed on the floor, like you're like a fakir or whatever. Just sit on the couch in a comfortable way and meditate. And there are really, right now, I think it's kind of a different landscape than years ago when I started, where I actually had the luck to meet with Mark and his crew. There were a bunch of Buddhist meditators that explained the ropes, right? Now that you have apps and you have top level Buddhist teachers that for free give you Dharma talks on your phone, right? So this is great. For example, for the longest time I used I just meditated by myself, in silence. Right now, I'm using the Sam Harris app that is called Waking Up. We have no financial stake in that, but this is just one of many. There's Oak. There is Mark can name some others. Calm, yes, exactly.
A lot of great apps.
Yeah. Waking Up is pay. You pay for it, and I think it's something like $100 for a year. So just 30 cents a day. Give me a break, right? So why do you need that? So here's the thing.
Please sponsor us. We would like to be
Please sponsor us. I mean, if you can send us Bitcoin, gold, checks, I accept anything. So so why meditation? What I got wrong at the beginning about meditation, I thought that was another ashes time because I had a little breakup with my little girlfriend at the time, which I realized that it wasn't really, a big deal, but, it took me a while to get there. Anyway, so I was in the ashes at the time and I was really down and I was like, oh, let me meditate so I feel better. That's not exactly how it works. It's not that you're stressed, you're sad, you're pissed, and you meditate and you're all good and you're like Buddha. Right? It's basically like trying, if you think like that, is like trying to fix a rotten tooth brushing your teeth. When you have a rotten tooth, you got to go to the dentist and, you need to prevent the tooth from getting the cavity by brushing. And the brushing is meditation. So for you to avoid getting into the pattern of like reactivity and being like really affected by what happens to you on the rag in your life, meditation, that's what it does. That's basically what allows you to take a little bit of a step from what's happening to you and just like ponder a little bit like what the reaction to it, the measured reaction to it should be. That's at least what it was for me. So it's not like stressed, oh, I see 20 minutes, I'm good. It's more like sit for like 10 years, 20 minutes a day. And then when some real shit happens to you, you will be able to be there for yourself, present for yourself, for the people that need you, that are around you. Think about, your loved one being diagnosed. I was there in the room with the doctor when they told Teal, like, you might have MS. And like, you better keep your shit together and be there and be strong and be comforting and grounding for a person that gets diagnosed with something like that. So that's the way I think about it. So that's a very, very big tool for me. And I know it's a pain in the ass. Like, the meditation, I mean, brushing, do you like brushing your teeth? No, I don't like brushing my teeth. I would like, to not brush and have perfect teeth but that's not how the world works. It's a pain because it's very boring but it's important. It's important. So that's why
for a lot of people just starting, it's not just boring, it's like really uncomfortable. I remember when I first started meditating, it's like, I mean, physically uncomfortable is just one thing, but it's mentally and like psychically uncomfortable, because it's not like in the movies where you're just like namasteing and, levitating on the, Mount Fuji, right? It's like, I hit my anxiety. I would feel so anxious. I would feel so scared. I would have like, shaking. I would have kind of old memories, old shame, old regrets, like everything just like gets dumped into your brain during that time. And it's the opportunity to work through that and feel through that and be present for all that stuff that, at least me, I repressed, right, for most of my life until I started meditating. But I just want people to know that it's not calm. Like, it's not like a chill thing.
Oh, it looks calm.
That, like, down the line, I think once you kind of go through the RAM and you can, like, unload a lot of the intensity. But in the beginning, it's really uncomfortable for people. It has a really steep learning curve, actually.
Yes, it's very uncomfortable. And it's basically constant failure because depending on what type of meditation you do, and I don't know the Sanskrit name for it, you can help me on that, Mark, but I do the meditation where you just focus on your breath and you just like you focus on that, and whenever a thought arises, you just like break it and go back to focusing on your breath, or maybe you focus on the floor. I meditate with my eyes open, staring at my floor, right? So, and you might think that if you don't manage to hold that state of like no thoughts in your mind, focused on your breath, you're doing it wrong. But actually, the exercise is to break the thought and go back. Because your mind think about your mind as a computer. Windows is like it's an operating system. So it does stuff. It does stuff and it shows you things all the time. So the exercise is to stop the program and go back to like kind of a blank screen if you want, but you can only stop that flow for a very, very short time at the beginning. And then with, time and many, many years and many, many hours of practice, it gets like longer and longer, right? But, I'm not a yogi. I'm not like a monk or anything. So 20 minutes, also to mitigate people's expectations, with 20 minutes a day for 10 years, maybe you can have your empty mind for like a minute. It's not, that's like, I just did it this morning. And by this morning, I was thinking like the whole time because I have a lot going on in my mind and that's it. It's fine. It's not that I'm doing it wrong or I suck at meditation. Is just the exercise that is frustrating. Until I understood this, it was very frustrating for me, but that's the actual exercise. And it's thinking, like with the people like walking on a rope. It's just like you can only have like that very precarious like balance on the rope if you're not a super expert for like a fraction of a minute, like for a few seconds. So that's cool. What else? Meditate. Read the Stoics. I like Buddhism a lot. I like the Stoics a little more because of their engagement with life. They were all very, very active and very engaged, where sometimes if you follow, I think, like certain traditions in Buddhism, you just like kind of like take a step out or back from life. But the most famous Stoics, or like at least like the one, there's not much that survived and arrived like to like untouched, right, to us. So there are not many original sources, but like some of the most prominent are Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor, and he was like at the apex of the Roman Empire. So like think about being like the most powerful man in the world, but people also legit think you're a god. So, and he was a Stoic.
Pretty tight.
And so it was like waging war and doing all this stuff. And then another one is Seneca. Seneca was the richest man in Rome. So it's like, think about, being, I don't know, like Super Bill Gates. You're Bill Gates, and he was also the teacher of another emperor, Nero. So very engaged with life, but also it's impressive. The cool one reading that it actually definitely made me think a lot is this diary of the emperor Marcus Aurelius. It's called Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, which is a very thin book, pretty easy to read. It's basically a collection of aphorisms. That was basically Marcus like writing his diary at the end of each day, like, emperoring, doing emperor stuff in Rome. It's like before going to bed, he would just write down, just you're not hot shit because you're an emperor. Who do you think you are? You're just a human, right? Or like some days you feel like you don't want to get out of bed, but it's in your nature to actually bring good to the world. It's crazy if you think about who this person was and what he was actually thinking. And he's also, another thing that strikes me is that it's like 2,000 years old, and how really, actual and current that book feels. So the Stoics.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I mean, I think another great resource is like the Tao of Seneca that Tim Ferriss puts out, which is just like a bunch of letters that Seneca writes to like a young like Roman senator. And I think for anyone that is interested in leadership, right, and who's in leadership positions, who's maybe an entrepreneur or a startup founder or something like that, it's really incredible to get this advice from a mentor. That, like you said, it's unbelievable how relevant the stuff that he's saying is now.
Yeah,
it's inspiring that like the human condition really hasn't changed, in whatever it was 2,000 years.
Yeah, in the end, like it talks about human nature. And yes, the circumstances are different, but how we feel about them, how we react to them, it's pretty much the same. It's the same software in our mind.
So Francesco, as we're wrapping up our podcast episode here, where can people find you if they want to learn more about Francesco Marsili?
Let's see. I am on Twitter at fmarsili, and also on Facebook, it's Francesco Marsili. And if you want to chat more, of like go deeper in whatever, you can also shoot me. You can also shoot me an email, and we can maybe we can post the my email on with the show notes.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for tuning in to From the Ashes. Please support us if you can. As we're starting this podcast, any support really, really helps us, especially reviews. So if you're on iTunes, hit us with that 5-star review because we obviously deserve it. Anything that helps to get us on the front page is really helpful. If you've gotten something out of this podcast, it's a small ask, and I think it will help, move this project forward. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week at another episode of From the Ashes. Take care.
Thank you for joining host Mark Azoulay for From the Ashes. Be sure to tune in again live next Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Empowerment Channel. We'll have another edition of the program then. Meet triumph and disaster and treat those two imposters the same. Until next time.